That's all they looked at the whole time. They just didn't have to look at themselves.
Right.
Yeah. All set? Yeah. All right, let's get started. So thank you guys for showing up. How many of you have been to one of our previous panel sessions so far? Awesome. Well, thank you for coming once again. This is the fourth installment and the final installment for this semester. We will have something else planned for you guys next semester. But this is our fourth installment of the Career Panel Series. The whole idea here is that you guys have an opportunity to hear from individuals who are within a certain field, not all necessarily doing the exact same thing. So maybe you have an idea that you do want to be in courts, corrections, law enforcement, all the people that we've had out this semester, and today specifically in the corrections field, but maybe you don't quite know exactly what it is that you want to do, or you're not sure exactly what the lifestyle is like within that field. You just know what you've read or what you've seen on TV. And this gives you an opportunity to be in a little bit more of an intimate environment where you can hear from individuals who are doing it, who have gotten to where you want to be, and they can give you advice and stories and other things about how they've gotten there. And then, so what we'll do is, if you have been here for our previous three sessions, we're going to do the same exact format. We'll start off with our panelists introducing themselves, the agency that they work for, just a brief introduction of themselves. Then I've got 4 questions that I've prepared. If you have been here in the past, they're very similar to the questions you've heard before, because I think that they're very valuable questions for you guys to hear as you're moving on through your college years. And then after that, we'll open it up for questions from you guys. So why don't we start down here with Reggie? Tell us about yourself.
My name is Reggi Williams. I am with the Adult Probation Department. I've been there almost 15 years. I am a supervisor with minimally assessed risk clientele. That's about it.
Hi, my name is Melissa Froderman. I am also with Maricopa County Adult Probation. I am a supervisor, and I supervise lots of different types of cases and units, but right now I supervise a 26-bed residential facility that is down the street at 10th Street in Garfield. Reggie and I were new officers together, and we were field partners, and now we are a package deal.
Unfortunately.
Well, thank you. Good evening. My name is John Zimmerman. I have the pleasure of being the Deputy Warden at the Maricopa Ranger Center with the Arizona Department of Corrections. It's located off of I-17 by Happy Valley Road and Pinnacle Peak. And so it's a 100-bed facility. It's designed for males only who are on parole, who have problems with substance abuse. So it's an intensive inpatient program, 3 to 4 months length stay. And so I have the opportunity to work there.
Good evening. My name is Ken Salmon, and unlike my colleagues, I am retired. I retired in 2015 after 25 years in federal corrections. I worked 12 years for the federal prison system, the first 6 as a corrections officer, the last 6 as a case manager, and then I worked 13 years as a federal probation officer here in the District of Arizona.
Great. Thank you for joining us. And I'm particularly excited about this panel because, from my own experiences being a student in this field of study, there's a lot of things that you just simply don't know are out there within your field of study. And for me particularly, corrections was something I learned a lot about after the fact. And so I think it's exciting that you have an opportunity to hear from our panelists today. And so I'm excited to hear your answers. So what we'll do is, again, we'll start with Reggie, but I won't start with Reggie on all 4 questions. It's not only to not put you on the spot, but to not steal all of your great answers along the way. So we'll start with Reggie on this one, and we'll work on but I would like to hear from all 4 of you on all of these answers. So, so the first question is a college degree a requirement to work within your agency? And if so, what advice do you have when students ask what kind of degree they should be pursuing? And then if not, can you discuss the benefits to our students who are pursuing their degree?
First, let me clarify that adult probation officers are not considered correction. We're actually by statute considered law enforcement. But there are certain positions within the department for which a degree is required. If you particularly want to know about a probation officer position, yes, you will require a 4-year degree. We also have surveillance office positions which require only associates. We do have people who come in with the associate's degree who get a feel for the department, and when they want to, if they aspire to be a probation officer, they then finish their credits to get the 4-year degree, at which point they can promote up to probation officer. As far as the types of degree, any degree that's going to require you to have some sort of contact with the public is definitely going to help you, such as your social sciences, your communications, things of that nature. There are very few degrees that will not, we'll take all degrees, I should say, but there are very few degrees that will not prepare you for working as a probation officer. You were
Absolutely. Yes. Anything that has you deal with human beings is something that we can work with.
With the Arizona Department of Corrections, like Reggie said, there's very little that we wouldn't accept as far as a particular degree. But the ones that work with the human factor and learning to deal with other human beings and their challenges is highly desirable. You do not need a degree to enter, but you pretty much need a degree to advance. The department puts a value on higher education to the point where you can fast track your career if you have a degree. You essentially get to move to the front of the line when you're competing in the hiring process with other people. So if you're competing for 10 spots and there's 200 people applying, if you have a degree, you could very easily, just by having that degree, be in the top 10%. So it gives you an advantage. The department also encourages people who are already in the field to continue their education. It provides a stipend of 2.5% for associates, 5% increase to your salary for undergraduate, and I believe 7.5% for master's degree. It also provides, I believe it's $3,000 each fiscal year towards your reimbursement for your education. So you do not need to get a degree to start, but you'll want a degree to continue and to advance. If you want to fast track from the beginning, right now you can do that with a degree. So I would encourage you to continue and finish your education.
I'll answer this from two perspectives. First, from the federal prison system. You don't need a degree to become a corrections officer. However, it is highly recommended. And that degree, a 4-year degree, can be substituted for general experience. What the Federal Bureau of Prisons does is they review your college transcripts. They review your work experience to determine if you have the general and practical experience to become an entry-level corrections officer. However, as John said, in order to advance within the federal prison system, you do need a degree because the federal prison system has other occupations besides corrections officers. You can go to case management, unit management, education, business office, maintenance. So some of those occupations do require a degree. So it is highly recommended that you finish your degree at ASU and continue on. As far as federal probation, you need a 4-year degree in order to become a federal probation officer. Also, you need a master's degree in order to become a supervisor. So that's a little bit different requirements for the two agencies. However, as I said, in order to advance, definitely a degree is required and highly sought after amongst its applicants.
Great, thank you. And real quickly, before we go on to the next question, I kind of wanted to go back to Reggie real quick, and you had made a really good point that probation is law enforcement. The reason it fit into this category was because it was post, I guess the court, sentencing, yeah, exactly. And so I wanted to give you an opportunity real quick to kind of talk about the various nuances of probation. I guess the way I've heard it described a lot of times is just kind of the perfect combination of social work and law enforcement combining together. But there obviously is this post-sentencing factor as well.
But we also have a pretrial unit that deal with those who have not yet been adjudicated or gone through the criminal justice system that are being watched while they're awaiting sentencing, and then they transition over to the probation side. But once they do get sentenced, yes, they do meet with a probation officer. They're assigned by usually geographic location, and then at that point, there are certain conditions that the court requires them to complete during the tenure that they're on probation. At which point, if they do not do so, you can of course have them revoked from probation, at which point they go back before the court. They can be reinstated to probation and get another chance at it, or some of them actually revoke probation, decide they would rather go to jail or to prison than to sit on probation. It's not cheap to be on probation, especially considering which offense you are in fact sentenced for. And some people just think it's easier than to have someone breathing down their neck and telling them what they can and cannot do as adults, to just go ahead and be sentenced and not do probation.
However, I would add, in the last 10, 15 years, we as a probation community have made strides to become less law enforcement oriented and more social work oriented. And so it is this perfect balance, because we do have to hold people accountable, and we are accountable to the community to keep the community safe. However, we want that person to rehabilitate, and we want that person, that individual, to go on and lead a more productive life. And that is going to look different to each person.
If I can also add that at the federal system, even though you're a federal probation officer, you are supervising offenders that have been released from federal incarceration or supervised release. So you do have some persons that have been sentenced or adjudicated to strictly probation. However, a majority of the offenders that you have on your caseload are serving a period of supervised release, which usually is 3 to 5 years after their federal sentence. So you are in that capacity a law enforcement, considered law enforcement as well.
All right, question number 2. We'll start with Melissa. So in addition to education, experience is also a very important aspect of getting a career in any law enforcement or courts or corrections or anything within the criminal justice field. What things should students be doing now while they're in college to give them the best chance at career success after graduation?
Yes, and before I became a probation officer, I worked at Safeway for 7 years. And I like to say I met all of my future customers at Safeway. Because, and not exactly true, although there were a couple that were dual customers. But that experience, 7 years of working with the public, was huge to my success, because the first time somebody gave me attitude back, it wasn't the first time I had gone through that. So even though I'm a brand new probation officer, I've dealt with people who were mad or didn't like me or, wanted to curse me out. And so that experience was huge, dealing with the public, and going back to that, dealing with any kind of human beings is huge, and will give you a lot of experience getting into this field. Yes.
I would encourage you to do an internship. Find a place where you're doing an internship that allows your hiring authority to contact the agency that you work for, find a little bit about you. Did you show up? Did you complete the task that was given to you? Could you work within the parameters of that organization? We all work in government. Government is complex and complicated sometimes with a lot of rules. You're going to have to learn to work within those rules. So learning how to do that will give you an advantage. So I would encourage you to do internships, do volunteer work, find a job, and do part-time. Even part-time shows you have work history, shows you know how to show up on Monday mornings and not calling sick. And your employers will be looking at those things. Your grades are important and completing, but they want to see some work history. Internship is really good.
I think what John said, internship, volunteer work. Also, take advantage of some of the programs that are available here at ASU. I know they have the Inside Out program where you actually go inside a prison. Find out if that's something that you would like to do and continue on. When I first started, after I graduated many years ago, I started in juvenile detention, and I got a feel for it. I learned about communication. I learned about the importance of communication. I thought, this is kind of interesting, and it was something that I wanted to pursue. And then, fortunately, the Federal Bureau of Prisons looked at my application, interviewed me. I accepted a position out here in Phoenix. And so, just try to get as many life experiences as you can to find out if dealing with the public, as Melissa said, is something that you would like to do. Dealing with people that are angry, if that's something you want to do. Working at a domestic violence shelter. Dealing with victims, if that's something you'd like to do. Just keep your mind open to the various experiences that are around you, and volunteer, participate in different programs or seminars just like this to hear people that have worked in the trenches, to see if that's something that you'd like to do. Rich?
We offer internships with the Adult Probation Department. We also do ride-alongs. You can apply to do a ride-along to see if it's something that you actually would like to do. We've had people that do ride-alongs and completely broadened their ideas to what they thought probation was. And we've had people that done it and it broadened it, and they realized it's not what they wanted to do. So if you get the opportunity, or you truly think that this is a path that you're considering, then I would say, if you're not ready for the internship step, then definitely see if you can do the ride-along. And actually, you sit with an officer, go out to some of the residences, see the kind of interactions that we have and that we're required to have, and you can make an assessment there as whether that is something you want to pursue.
Great.
I'd like to also add, you can take a tour somewhere. I get tours on a regular basis, probably every 6 to 8 weeks from ASU. A professor will say, I have a student who's interested in this particular line of work, could they come visit? You get a one-on-one tour, you get to meet the staff, you get to ask questions, you get to observe a class or an activity, see what they do. So I'm going to encourage you, do tours. Spend a day at someone's office. Most organizations will take care of that, accept that request.
I'm going to, again, ask a deviating question here. I'm going to ask this of Melissa because I feel like she's going to give me a good answer here based on what she said. So, and this is a selfish question, but it's going to help them. So I get students that every time I give a writing assignment or I give a group project where they have to speak, they get so frustrated at me. Why am I having to speak? Why am I having to write when I want to be in criminal justice? And you just hit the nail on the head that you have to deal with people. And I'm assuming writing reports and things like that's pretty good. So can you speak to the importance of those things that may frustrate a student, but will ultimately lead, and anybody can jump in, but will benefit them in the long run?
Absolutely. And, like you said, we work for the government and there are rules. And so the short text, the abbreviated text, we don't do that. We haven't come to that yet in government. Probably won't come around to that anytime soon. But yes, you do need to be able to articulate your thoughts on paper, because we are charged with giving the court recommendations. And so we have to let the court, so something maybe is going great and we want this person to get off probation early. We need to be able to write down and articulate our thoughts as to why this person deserves to get off probation early. Or something has gone wrong, they've committed a new crime, and now we need to let the court, because the court, is obviously, in the court I'm talking about judges. So very busy, lots of things going on, and so we do their work. We are an extension of the court, and we need to be able to write our thoughts down and tell the judges what is happening and give articulate recommendations. And so, yes, it's very important, very important.
Also, if you are asked to go to a witness hearing, you need to be comfortable speaking on the stand. If you are high anxiety types, when you have to talk, you are going to definitely need to practice talking, because they're going to ask you questions that are definitely fact-based. You'll have the defense and you'll have the state, and they'll both be asking you questions that you may be able to think quickly on your feet. The judge may ask you questions. So being able to write your report, knowing exactly what's in your report, and not being afraid to actually vocalize what's on paper to the judge on record is very important when you have witness hearings, and they do happen.
Good, thank you. All right, well, I think we'll start with John on this one. That's our next one. So the background check process is always something that students are very intrigued about, and I think rightfully so. And when it comes to patterns of behavior and past experiences, I think not only from a legality standpoint, but also just in terms of character and things like that. In this particular field, criminal justice as a whole, it's valued probably more than any other field. And so can you speak to the importance of the decisions that they're making now? A lot of students are encouraged to go out and have fun and do what you want to do, which is not a bad advice as long as you know the boundaries. But this is the time to experiment. It's college, and things like that. And I would say that that's terrible advice for somebody who's going into the criminal justice field. So that's where I'd like to pick up on this one. And we can start with you, John.
I have a saying: the choices you make today affect the opportunities you're going to experience in the future and tomorrow. You will get if you hire on with a government agency, you will get most often the law enforcement type agency, you're going to get a background check. They're going to check your social media accounts. They're going to look into your lives. And you will have to say what you did even as a child. When I hired on, I had got in trouble when I didn't have a driver's license yet. I think I was 15. I was in the woods in the state of Oregon with lots of trees, and I was cutting down these little trees and fashioning them with rope. This ranger came up in a green outfit and said, "What you doing there, son?" I said, "Well, sir, I'm making a raft to float down the river." He said, "Do you have a permit for the cutting those trees?" I said, "What?" "Well, guess what? That's on my record." And every time I want a job, I'm going to ask that question. I'll be asked that question. I have to explain that. The photos you take, who you take photos with, you may be your best friends, but If they're crossways with the law, it will not benefit you. It could be your family. It will not benefit you. You have to watch everything you do, who you're with, what you post, and because it will be looked at quite often. So most places nowadays will give people a second chance. At least with our department, we're looking at the second chance part. We give offenders and inmates a second chance. We're looking at giving staff a second chance. But that's still a very fine line. So understand what you do today and the fun you have will affect your tomorrow. People will look back to your birth to see what you did and who you did it with. So keep that in mind.
I'd like to note real fast that all four of our panelists, the very first thing that everybody mentioned was social media when it came to this question. So.
Yeah, I think just to piggyback on John, I think we live in a society where somebody's watching you or someone can be watching you. I think it's important, you're going to have a background check initially. Every 5 years, you're going to have a reinvestigation of a background check as well, especially the federal system. So my advice is just to be honest. There's some things that we're probably not proud of that we did maybe when we were teenagers or something you did, 2 weeks ago. Just be honest. Let them decide whether it's something they want to pursue, or maybe it's something they need a further investigation on, or maybe it's something that they can overlook for the hiring process. But it's important to remember that you're always representing your agency. I think that's the important part. Even though, as I said, I worked for a couple different agencies, that was the one thing that was stressed when I was hired for, just because your shift is over, you still represent the agency. So whatever you do is a representation not only of yourself, but of the agency that you work for. I think that's important to remember. And I think going into the criminal justice system as well, you understand that people make bad decisions, and some are caught, and they have the consequences of those actions. And you're the same thing as an employee of whatever agency you decide to work for. If you make bad decisions, you have to understand that there are consequences of those actions. And the agency can do many things, as far as your employment is concerned. I worked with several people that were hired, and unfortunately something came back during their background check, and they were terminated after 2 or 3 months after being hired. So it's something you don't want to happen to you. Once you get a job, you'd like to keep a job. As I said, all these agencies that we're talking about have some sort of pension after 20, 25 years of service. And in today's world, a pension is a pretty good thing to have. So just remember, you represent the agency, and the actions there or the words that you say can and do have an effect on your employment. Reggie?
I have a saying too. If it's not something your mother or father be proud of, they see it on the news, don't do it. Don't post it on social media. It will come back to bite you. Also, one thing that's not within your control, but is also going to be asked when you do the background packet, will be family members. You have family members who have been charged with any criminal offenses or currently incarcerated. Be honest on that particular question. It isn't necessarily anything that's going to be held against you, but they do need to know in the event that the names cross paths, and it's not something that surprises them in the event that they are released and say they come onto probation. We need to know that they are related to you because that's a conflict of interest. Also, even if your pictures are clean on your social media and the people you hang with are awesome, don't put anything on your social media that if you think it is inside or right, probably shouldn't type it. If it's not something that you're willing to share publicly and you're okay with the way people are going to view it, you should probably not put it on there, because it is something that can and will be held against you if it shows any sort of political beliefs or anything of that nature to one degree or the other. You will be given the opportunity to explain it or not. It just depends. We have classes that rotate in and out of the academy probably every 4 months or so. When you come up for your interview, that is one of the things that we will look at, as well as your family documentation. So just make sure you're completely honest, and just be careful at this point. If you haven't done it yet, don't do it now. And if you have done it, you might want to change and veer a different direction if this is the career field for which you want to go into, because it will be taken apart, it will be dissected.
Absolutely. And then, just to add to that, experimentation, I think, is one of the words that you use. If someone is telling you, this is the time to experiment, how old is that person who's telling you that, and what career do they have? Let's look at that. So we definitely want to be taking advice from people who are successful. And so, as Reggie would say, cut out the weed, no more weed. That's not necessarily going to disqualify you for a job in this field if that has ever happened. But if that does happen, I would stop that now. Another thing that you're definitely going to want to be cognizant of is drinking and driving. You know, if you're 21, it's okay to have a drink. That's perfectly legal. It's fine. However, getting DUIs is definitely something that would be taken very seriously.
And the people you hang with, if they act a fool out in public when you all have been drinking, separate yourself. Because if in fact they are arrested and you're with them, you are judged by the company you keep. That name pops up and you're with them. And when we run the background checks, there are going to be a lot of questions if you even make it to the background process, because they feel like you're not responsible enough to handle your alcohol, even though it is legal. No disorderly conduct, no belligerence. Don't sing out in the middle of the street because you've been drinking a lot. You're getting lit. You guys call it out in the street.
Is that what you guys call it?
Do it inside. Do it inside. Do it all inside.
One of the questions you're going to see, or opportunities when you hire on with a state agency, you're going to, in the job description, it's going to talk about operating a motor vehicle on state business. That's often a make or break deal about your ability to be hired if you can operate a vehicle. So if you have a DUI, that can be like Melissa and Reggie said, that could kill it right there. So please, watch what you do on public and behind the wheel, because it will be judged when you try to get a job.
And to tag on to what Reggie said about posting political things and stuff like that, I had a student. I tell students the same thing about social media, and I had a student say one time, "Well, I'm not allowed to have political opinions." And so now I add on. I say, "Well, that's not what it is. Of course, you're allowed to have your political opinions, but if you are showing that you are completely biased one way or another to an extreme degree, when you are supposed to be somebody that's representing everybody, and you could have somebody of any political affiliation on your, on your caseload, then that's problematic. Or if you're somebody that looks like they could be, manipulated or bribed or blackmailed or something of that nature for things that you've done, that's also problematic as well. So it's not that you can't be political. Of course you can have your opinions, but it's when you're extreme to a degree that can impact your job, I think. That's okay, the last question that I have before we'll move it on to questions from you guys, and this one is also a really important one too, because as Reggie again talked about, when she talked about ride-alongs, one of the benefits of doing an internship or ride-along with something is that you can find out, yes, I'm truly passionate about this, or you could find out I really don't want to do this. And you may have your opinions of what work life is like based on your parents or your friends or your aunts and uncles or people who are not within the field, people who work 9-to-5 jobs and have weekends off, and that may be all you've ever seen from people who are employed. Whereas usually within the criminal justice field, it's not like that. Or even if you do get a typical schedule, the clientele you're working with are not your typical clientele. You may get, I'm sure, as John will talk, I'm sure you too as well, and even Ken, people who are screaming at you and angry at you, and very stressful situations and things that your typical 9-to-5 banker or whatever else it may be does not have to deal with on a regular basis. So we'll start down with Ken. So as I was saying, a career in corrections is unlike any other. So can you speak to the things that are different in the, a term I like to use a lot of times is culture shock. It's a huge difference from what they're used to, what they see, what they know, to all of a sudden what they see when it comes to the real life thing. So what do they need to know about that kind of difference, and how can it affect their lives, their family lives, their social lives, things like that?
Well, Eric, I think the important thing is that we've all been exposed to movies about prisons, and it's nothing like that. There isn't riots and stabbings and shanks in every cell. I think that's the important stereotype that you have to get rid of once you enter a facility. However, the important thing is, and when I started with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, fortunately, I served in the military for 4 years, so I dealt with adversity. I dealt with people that were angry. I dealt with people screaming at me, things of that nature. But the great thing about corrections is people around you are going to mentor you. And I think that's important. When I started as a newly hired corrections officer, one of the greatest pieces of advice was given to me by a warden that said to me, the people here are not here for missing church. They're evil, they're bad, they've done bad stuff. And I think you have to have that mindset when you walk into a facility, or if you're going into somebody's house as a probation officer, you know who the bad guys are, you know who the bad girls are. So you have to have that mindset. You have to think about your safety. You have to think about what if something happens, what am I going to do? You have to know, your escape routes, things of that in a house. So I think that's important, that you know that they're there for a reason. And I think that's a good starting point. So the other thing is you can't show that you're nervous. When I talk to other corrections officers or people that are interested in the corrections field, I tell them, you have to walk into a prison like you own the place. You have to show confidence. You have to walk with a certain confidence, because inmates can see that. They can sense if you're scared. They can sense if you have issues at home. Never discuss issues at home with an inmate because they will feed on that and they'll find your vulnerability. I think that's important as well, is to understand your clientele. And then also the great difference between the corporate world and the prison world is the fact that the culture of the prison is by far different from going to work at a bank or going to work at Intel or whatever it may be. You deal with people that are angry. You deal with people that have killed people. You deal with people that have assaulted people of that nature. So I think you have to have that understanding when you go into a work in any facet of the criminal justice system, is to understand your clientele and understand what you're getting into. It's not going to be a desk job, even though there are some desk jobs within the criminal justice field. If you're going to work in corrections, you're most likely going to be in a prison. You're most likely going to be in an offender's house, doing a welfare check, doing a home visit, doing an employment check. So those are the things you have to understand, is the vast array of experiences that you're going to have. And probably the best thing to do to equip yourself is to just work on your communication, because that ultimately is your best weapon in an offender's home or in a prison by far, is the ability to communicate and the ability to de-escalate a situation that can get ugly. I think that's important as well. As Melissa said, working at Safeway was a great avenue for her to kind of hone her skills, to hone her verbal skills. And I think anytime you have an opportunity to work on that as a student, as an employee, whatever it may be, it's always, communicate effectively, communicate, in words that are going to persuade someone, because you're going to have the power to persuade people. I've dealt with riots, I've dealt with murders, I've dealt with inmate suicides, things of that nature. You're gonna see a variety of different experiences, and they're gonna affect you differently. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, you want to leave. You want to get out of there and go home to your family. And I think you have to have that mindset of, I'm going into a situation that can get ugly. It can turn for the worst in a matter of minutes. So you have to understand what you're getting into as a criminal justice student, and understand, what you need to do to survive.
Reggie?
Wow. Follow that.
Good job.
We'll take his.
How many of you have siblings? Then you've had some experience with conflict. You are in the door at point A. The difference, we were discussing it on the way here, is that we don't get to choose who our clients are, just like they do in the corporate world. Those people voluntarily walk into those places of business. Ours are there sort of voluntarily because they committed the offense and now they have to pay the price for committing the offense. But they don't want to be there. This is involuntary for them. And one thing you have to be able to deal with is these people are going to be angry. The easiest emotion to show and display is anger. Nobody wants to get caught doing something they're not supposed to, especially when they could risk their freedom. So when you go in, if you treat them like human beings, typically they do come down when they're escalated. That always works. Like you said, as long as you exert confidence and you don't sit in the corner and cower when they are getting upset, because a lot of them will test you just to see if you will push back. And as long as you stand stern and strong and you say, okay, when you're done, then we can proceed, and you keep it even level, they realize that they look foolish up here when you're here, and they usually come down. You're taught de-escalation when you go through the academy. It's a very, very, very effective first role of defense when you have someone who is angry. We get a lot of people who will come through that when they test positive on their UAs. They tested positive. They know that but they will deny it to the end of the world. That is not what happened. It was somebody else's math. It was somebody else's urine. They made a mistake at the place they did not use. You have to stand steadfast and not argue and push back, because they will try that control issue. They will push as long as you allow them to. As long as you stay stern, just practice that. Realize that at the end of the day, you are going to be the ones to make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to, that they're fully compliant with their conditions of probation. And usually if you remind them of that, realize that their probation is at stake, some of them come down. Now you will have times where you may need the assistance of another officer because someone is just really just not coming down. And you can always ask them to leave. That's the other thing. If you feel like it's getting out of control, you can ask them to leave the office day. Another thing you need to remember is that when you go to the residences, the families often don't want you there. The good thing about probation is that a lot of times when you make that first visit and you talk to the families, as long as you're respectful of the rules when you're in their house and you're not disrespectful to the people who are the homeowners, they're usually on board with you getting help with whoever it is in their family that's on probation. But don't march in like, I'm going to be here whether you like it or not. The arrogance does not fare well in this position at all. But just remember, you are going into their personal lives. You are venturing into homes where the people that they live with are not on probation, and they're trying to understand, why do you get to walk through my house and tell me what can and cannot be here? So just remember, they're human just like you are. You can be on the opposite side of the table by a simple mistake. So you are no better than they are. They're no worse than you are. As long as you go on with that approach and the way you talk to them and the way that you interact with them will definitely help you be able to keep it de-escalated and not have to worry about any of the fear that a lot of you probably think you may have when you become a probation officer or any law enforcement officer for that.
Right, and I think this is the topic that all of us could probably talk for days about, yes. As you could probably tell. But you know, I think that speaking as a probation officer, it's this beautiful marriage of having confidence but also being humble. So humility, I think, is also huge, and it's been huge in my success, because I want people to succeed, right? I don't want people to get arrested again. I don't want them to commit more crimes. I want them to be at home with their children, and so that their children don't commit crimes and that they're not in jail, right? So it's this. I am confident, and all of the things that everyone here said. But I'm also willing to be humble enough to take a step back and just to listen and to maybe wait and figure out what's really going on here. And that's part of what Reggie was talking about with the, de-escalation. Just taking that step back and getting the entire picture before you react.
I'll touch on a couple things. Kenneth mentioned the part about what it's like to work in a prison. You watch movies, there's no harmonica music in a prison. That doesn't exist. It's very mundane, business as usual. It's the same thing usually day in and day out. It's very routine and can be monotonous. But you don't work alone. You work as a team. You have each other's back. You look out for each other's safety. Someone's watching you and you're watching someone else. And that's what allows you, as he said, go home at night. I'd also encourage you, in this business, you will find people who will coach you. If you're new and you want to move up, you understand something, they'll usually assign you someone to mentor you to learn the ropes. But you also can find a coach. I'm always coaching people, and you can find a coach that can show you how to maneuver in that system that you're in that organization. That's invaluable. So find a coach. You touched on humility. We often deal with people we meet them sometimes on their worst possible day. They're angry, they're intoxicated, they're drunk, they're off their psych meds, their life has crashed, their dog ran away, their girlfriend left them, and someone stole their truck. I mean, it's literally like that sometimes. And you have to stand firm, you have to know your position. It's not an argument or a debate. There to do business and to take care of things. But often just how you come across as an individual to that person in the worst possible moment can either escalate or de-escalate. Or talk about de-escalation. The more you develop your skills to de-escalate a situation, to explain yourselves, to be able to bring people down from an anxious moment, will benefit you greatly. It's a skill that has to be learned. Practice it. By interning someplace or volunteering someplace, you can learn those skills. You will need to have those skills. That you're not going to be very successful in the business. So you need to learn how to communicate, be able to express yourself. Previously, we talked about writing. In my business in the prison, we don't do a lot of writing for judges, but we write for the Board of Executive Clemency. That's not the Department of Corrections. They answer directly to the governor of the state of Arizona. So if we mess up, it gets reported directly to the governor. That's a really bad thing. So you have to learn how to write reports, what to put in them, how to write them, how to do it very effectively. Often even though you work as a team and you have a supervisor, a lot of what we do is solve problems. You have to learn to find solutions. And sometimes solutions can look really far out there. You have to find solutions to someone's crazy moment, to someone's worst moment in their life. You have guidance through laws and policy and procedures. Your job is to put pieces back together often, find a way to give a man or a woman or a juvenile a second chance of life with parameters. So learning to find solutions to issues is important.
And I want to ask one follow-up question, and Ken triggered this question in my head about wanting to go home at nighttime, and it's not specifically to what you meant by it, but we have students a lot of times that they come in without a whole lot of idea of the criminal justice field, and so they think about things like, I want to work for the FBI, DEA, something like that, and then they come to find out, oh, I have to move, or they tell me I have to move, and I'm from Arizona, I'm from California, that's where I want to be, that's where my family is, that's where I want to stay. So you talk about maybe the benefits of maybe a career like this, and the fact that you can kind of maybe plant your roots in somewhere and be there for the long haul and still be in the criminal justice system, working for the government, getting your pension and all that without having to maybe go through some of the things that a lot of people don't want to do.
Even before we started this, and I was talking to Natalie. And I mentioned that we have people like, even if the federal path is definitely your path, like you are dead set, you want to be a federal officer. If you can get on the county or city level first, you may realize that I actually kind of like it here because you can divert into different specialized caseloads. You can work with the domestic violence caseload. You can work with the seriously mentally ill. You can work with sex offenders. You can do things that you probably maybe pigeonholed when you go federal. And if you decide you still want to, you have some experience under your belt with dealing with people that are as a law enforcement officer that you may not necessarily have any experience with otherwise. So even if this is your stepping stone, get in and try it. You may stay, you may not, but at the end of the day, if it benefits you to continue your career path that you've chosen in law enforcement, then you're all the better for it.
Yeah, she's been threatening to leave for 14 years.
14 years.
And she's still here. She's still here.
Only because the weather's good. Only because the weather's good.
It's a team, right? Everybody said a team.
I think what Reggie said is important because as a corrections officer, people are like, I don't want to work as a prison guard. That's kind of their mentality. But I'll tell you, it's a great stepping stone. And some of the quote unquote prison guards I worked with are FBI agents, work at DEA, work for the CIA, work for the U.S. Marshal Service. So it's a great stepping stone. It's a great foundation because as a corrections officer, you learn about communication, you learn about security, you learn how to fire different weapons. You learn self-defense tactics, which are a foundation for any law enforcement occupation you go into. So anyone who talks, says, I don't know if I want to go into corrections, I would be more than happy to tell them the many, many benefits of going into corrections.
John, I assume there's plenty of people on your staff that have been there for years and years and years as well and made long careers out of it.
I am a little whiter and grayer than my colleagues, so congratulations. But if you want to make a career, you can do it quickly or you can stay a long time. If you want to move about, you can move about. We have complexes all over the state in every corner you can imagine, or you can stay put. You have choices within the state. Another thing I would like to mention is one of the benefits that I learned. I came into this department in 1987 as a young man in my 20s. I learned leadership. One of the things that this department allowed me to learn on the job was leadership. I didn't know that before, but it's something that I excelled at and has helped me in my life, whether who I'm working with, who I'm collaborating with outside agencies. This taught me leadership. One more point I'd like to make is your ability to understand and know your community resources. often when I sit on, I'm not on parole, but I sit on parole boards, hiring boards. And one of the questions that we need to know is if you're going to be a parole officer, imagine probably similar to probation, you're going to be asked, okay, you have your clients, they have needs. What's out there? How are you going to help them? You need to know what your community resources are. Who does what, under what niche? Everyone has a niche, whether it's faith-based, whether it's a government, whether you need access or a different type of insurance. And knowing who to go to help your clients. It's much like being a social worker. You need to know your resources. To know who's who and where to get help will give you an edge when you go to apply for these type of positions.
Great. Thank you very much. So we do have about 10 minutes left, and I'd like to open it up to these students, see if there's any questions about experiences, about paths that you should be able to take, maybe whether you're on the right path or not. Any questions?
So I'm kind of interested in like the psychology area with the criminal justice, and I'm kind of deciding whether it should be like diversion or probation officer. So I was wondering like how do those kind of overlap in like the day to day, and then what's a starting position that you would recommend for like the probation?
If you're going to have your degree, you can start as a probation officer. I would say come in. There's an 8-week academy that touches upon a bunch of stuff. And before that, you get to shadow a lot of the officers in different caseloads. So you may decide that if you want to do diversion, you may decide you want to pigeonhole it or specialize it for DV offenses or sex offender or transfer youth, young adults who come in that were adjudicated young and now they're on adult probation, or the seriously mentally ill. You may decide you want to divert that way. We don't have a lot of the diversion program. We used to do a lot of the task diversion, and they would come to us, and if they failed, of course, then they would be charged with their offense. That's the only experience I've had with the diversion programs that are out here. I can't talk to that much.
Well, and I would like to say that one of the things I think I said 40 minutes ago was that we've made some huge strides in leaning more towards the social work angle. And what we're finding is that most of the people who end up, in front of one of us or are the people we work with have a trauma or multiple traumas that have happened in their life that they haven't received help for. And so that, I have a psychology degree from ASU from a while ago, but, I think having that knowledge, at least a base of it, is helpful. And sometimes the probation officer is the only positive person who's trying to help the person in their life. And so we have this really important role of trying to help somebody get to a point where they're getting help for something they didn't even know they needed help for. That answers your question.
Now, we also have counselors there, and that might be a group that you would like to talk to as far as them having any internship programs.
Right.
That would be more of a fit for what you're looking for as far as diversion. But they work with our therapeutic courts, which are our DUI courts, our drug courts, and things of that nature. So that may be a good fit for you too. It's just a matter of getting in there, kind of filling around with getting an internship or getting an interview, kind of sit and talk. Like the therapeutic courts, you can actually go and sit and listen to some of the cases as they come through and see if that's a path you want to take as well.
So you guys mentioned that for probation, you guys mentioned there's like law enforcement officers. So is there like a minimum age to go into probation or
21.
21. Other questions?
Well, recently I saw on the news that with Jeff Epstein suicide, they kind of brought to light that most like corrections and that feels very underfunded and low staffed. Would you agree with that? And like, how do you think would fix that problem with the corrections around there?
Well, you can solve the staffing issues a number of ways. There are options. One is to increase salary. So that is, you've seen in the last, at least for the state, this past year, line staff, corrections officers received 10% increase. You'll probably see another jump this next year, just like Red for Ed did 2 years in a row. So you will probably see, I don't have a crystal ball, but you'll probably see a second bump. With that increase, we've seen, at least as a couple of months ago, we were looking to see how that was, how that affected us, and we were holding steady. So we weren't losing, we weren't declining in our staffing populations. We were holding steady with that. That's a very positive thing. So the more you can keep them steady or keep people from leaving, your vacancies fill up that way. Another way of doing it is we have 44,000 inmates in the system. That's a lot of men and women and juveniles. How our laws affect the sentencing laws or affect how long we keep them in there, or how long when they stay in there, how they can get released. Right now, there's a lot of discussion about justice reform that's been going on for a couple of years, more behind the scenes. Politicians don't always come out and talk about those, but we're hearing more and more that discussion is becoming public. So you're going to be seeing actually there's probably some significant reform which will affect the population. And basically, if you have fewer inmates, you have more staff it's condensed. So your population, affects your population, how far you stretch your staffing allocations.
I have a kind of a piggyback question on that. Somebody asked this, and I don't know if it was our last panel or the one before, but it actually led to some pretty interesting responses. The importance of separating the stresses that and Ken, you hit on this a little bit, don't bring in your personal life at home, but also not bringing in the stresses of work. So you had just talked about being understaffed, I'm sure that can lead to frustrations or overworked, overwhelming caseloads, things of that nature. Not allowing it to enter too much into your personal life, because I'm sure that could bring burnout at a very early age. It should not. So anybody talked about that? I'm sure you all could actually.
Absolutely. My husband is a probation officer as well, and my mother works for the department. I have an uncle who's a probation officer. Same department. My sister also.
We all work for her family.
Yeah.
Already.
My sister is also a pre-sentence screener, which is a different position with the probation department. So, we kind of talk about this nonstop. But I think the most important thing is, one, recognizing when you need help, because it's okay to get help. Because some of the things that you're going to see or hear are going to be not only stressful. I mean, someone yelling in your face is stressful, but when you hear about a trauma that someone else went through, that can be kind of traumatizing to you in a secondary way. And so recognizing when you need help and getting it is what I would recommend. And then number two is make sure you are having fun in some aspect of your life. So if you like traveling, make sure you're doing that. If you like playing basketball, make sure you're doing that. If you like working out, watching movies, make sure you're doing that, and make sure that you continue. And sometimes it can be a challenge when you're tired and all you've heard is about terrible things all day, or you're just mentally stressed out. It can be a little bit hard, but you've got to make sure you reach out to those connections that you have to discuss other things.
You guys may not have heard it much now because you're young, but work-life balance, you'll hear a lot as you get older and really start working towards your career. One of the things that you want to remember, like she said, is you get time off. Take it. One of the good things about being a probation officer is the flexibility of your hours. You're not locked to your desk from 8 to 5. If you're a morning person, you can come in earlier in the morning and get off later in the afternoon. Go do what you enjoy in the afternoon. You can come in later in the day if you're not a morning person. You can come in on the weekend if you want to flex the day out during the week. So just make sure that you take care of you, because if you don't, the job will eat you.
But one of the huge perks, and I'm going to assume for all government jobs, is that you do have vacation. We have vacation, and a lot of times, when you're working for a different company in the corporate world or whatever, you don't have vacation, or it's only 1 week a year. But we have very generous vacation packages, and I think that is by design.
And so, John, having gotten to the rank that you have, through a long career, and then Ken being on the outside looking in, are there things that you look back on now when you were maybe, at the stage of your career that Melissa and Reggie are in, and you think, well, I wish I would have, learned more about self-care, or I wish I would have done things a little differently, or advice that you would give to somebody now that you're where you're at looking backwards?
When I was young, I thought I was indispensable, indestructible, and could do anything and take anything on. I could for a while. We all can, but you got, like was already mentioned, you have to learn how to take care of yourself. And if you become toxic, you become toxic to the people around you that love you. I am married, and when I go home, I tell my wife the funny things at work, where I don't say the bad things, but when my wife says how was work, I'll relay a conversation about something I had with someone. I have something to say, but I don't take that part of the work home. In my job, I'm on call 24/7. It never leaves me. I'll always have 2 phones on my hand. I've got right here in the Pleasant where I'm sitting there talking with you. That doesn't change. But what I take home with me is the funny moments. I have good relationships. I enjoy going to work every day. I have fun. The people that work for me, most of them have fun too. They like what they do. They enjoy their job. They believe they're making a difference. Corrections and parole or probation, they're very unique. But we serve a purpose. We have a mission, and we help a lot of people. And so if you understand you can give your life of service to help change society and change people's lives, that's very rewarding. So looking, now I can say, I've had meaning to my life and through my work. I also have a family and kids and grandkids, but I can say now, I've done some good things. I've seen some changes. We've helped, people along the way, both whether it's staff or the clients that we serve. So that's rewarding. But when you're young, you may be able to do it all for a while, but it will end. So you need to learn to take care of yourself, balance it out. Talk about hobbies, taking your vacation time. That working overtime, time and a half can look appealing, but when you wear out, you will hit a wall. At some point, there is a wall. So take your time. Take your time and get away. Put your phone down. Part of what I look at in hindsight is I had to learn to, for the longest time, going back about 10 years ago, I had to select my vacations to Mexico because my phone wouldn't ring in Mexico. I wouldn't purchase the international plan for a reason. I needed to disconnect. And so, if you're on call, they will find you no matter where. So it may mean you need to think outside the box. I need to go to Cancun or something for my, annual vacation, get away for a long weekend where work can't find you. But take your time off. You need to get smart, figure out what works, but you'll find a way. Take care of yourself.
I think one of the important things is unfortunately you're going to become cynical. It's just part of the job. You're dealing with the outcasts of society, the felons of society. So you become cynical and become hardened to a point, which during my 25 plus years in corrections is something that I didn't want to happen, but unfortunately it's a byproduct of the environment. Is the fact that every day you go in and you're dealing with felons, you're dealing with people that don't like you. You're dealing with family members of people that don't like you. And so you have a responsibility when you take that oath, to protect society, to do good, to make a difference. And I think, it becomes a burden to some point. You have to balance, everything that you're doing, your family life, your work life, getting phone calls at 3 a.m. from Phoenix police saying one of your offenders was just arrested. I mean, it's constantly something that's going on in your life. However, you got to find that balance. You got to find those outlets within your life, to help get you through the day and get you through the week, because it is a very, very rewarding job. However, it's very, very, very frustrating as well. And I think, when I look back at some of the things I've accomplished, I mean, you're going to have offenders that are going to send you Christmas cards that are on your caseload. And I had offenders of coworkers that have been invited to baby showers. They've just become part of their family. Some of the people, as they were saying, as a probation officer, you become part of a person's family, and sometimes you're the only good thing going in a person's life. And so they see that and they open up to you. They see you're going to hear things about their inner secrets that you probably don't want to hear. But however, you're the shoulder that they cry on. So I said that's the rewarding part, is the fact that you really make a difference in someone's life. However, that same person, could the next day get a DUI, and they're doing so well, or they can get in a car accident because they were drunk, or they, they killed someone. You just don't know what the next day happens. And so that's part of the frustration of the job, is the fact that you cannot predict human nature. And especially for someone that's inclined for criminality, it's very hard to predict. I think you have to guard against that when you go into professions such as in corrections, probation, the court system, is the fact that you know what you're getting into, and you have to expect the unexpected.
Well, we are at 6:30, and as you probably picked up on, our panelists do have families, and it is nighttime, so we are going to wrap things up. But I'm sure if you did have questions or anything that you just didn't want to ask or didn't have a chance to ask, maybe you can come down real quick and ask in a more one-on-one nature. But if we give a round of applause to our panelists, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and thank you all for being here as well.
Thank you.